Welcome to a lesson with Dr. Powell. Let's look at the domain of a logarithm graph or a log function. Suppose we have log base 3 of x or anything like that. Now, we saw that the graphs look something like this. You should see very clearly what the domain is. It's the range of what we had over here. Now, the range of an exponential goes from 0. Notice it doesn't include 0 because we never get down to 0, but 0 upward. That's the range, but it's also the domain over here. That means we cannot plug in anything negative nor 0 into here. So whenever we have a log, we actually have a restriction. The inside of a log has to be strictly greater than 0. It can't be equal to 0, like under a square root. Under a square root, you can have greater than or equal to 0 for what goes inside. But for a logarithm, you can't. It just has to be greater than 0. So let's look at an example of that. Suppose that we have a function, f of x is equal to log base 7 of x minus 10, all divided by, let's do the square root of, let's do the square root of 20 minus x. And let's find the domain of this function. Now let's look at all the different types of restrictive operations which we have. We have a logarithm. That's a restriction right there. We have a square root, and we have a division. So we have 3 different restrictions. Let's look at the logarithm first. For the logarithm, that means that the inside of it, what goes inside, has to be greater than 0 strictly. Let's look at the division. That means that what goes underneath it, square root of 20 minus x, cannot be equal to 0. Let's look at the square root. That means that what goes inside of it, the 20 minus x, has to be greater than or equal to 0. So we have an example of all 3 different types of restrictions. Notice that it doesn't matter which base you're using for a logarithm, the restriction's always the same. The input just has to be bigger than 0. Okay, so we just work through all of these. Notice on the top, we get x is greater than 10. On the bottom here, we're going to get adding x to both sides. We get x is less than or equal to 20. Now, what about this part? Let's work with that. Square root of quantity 20 minus x is not 0. Square both sides. 20 minus x not equal to 0. So then add x to both sides, we get x is not equal to 20. So in interval notation, we would go from 10, not including it, up until 20, but we actually, oh, that's it. X is not equal to 20. I meant to write, right? Okay, x is not equal to 20. Sorry. So we go up to 20, but then we don't include it. So from 10 up to 20, but not including. Thanks for watching.